I'm DJ, and welcome to One Shots Tavern, a TTRPG podcast where we seek out new ways to tell your stories through different systems and games. And today, I am joined by Sean, also known as CritHitTheGiant. Hey, Sean, how's it going?
Hey, not bad. How you doing?
Fantastic. So, Sean, give the listeners a little bit of a dossier on you and what it is you do.
Yeah, I just got into the tabletop role playing game world and community about a couple years ago, and I started playing consistently about last year. Since then, I've been creating, social media videos primarily on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. I've been releasing YouTube videos. I have a website about tabletop role playing games and board games in general. My family and I love to play board games, so I'll do some board game reviews and discussions and stuff like that as well too. But I'm primarily on social media, just like posting videos for the most part and posting things on threads just about discussion topics for things in the tabletop role-playing games world right now. So what am I doing with all of it? Like, I don't know. It's not my full-time job. It's just something I've been doing for fun, and that's just what it is. Just a fun hobby to play those games and then to like connect with other people in the community and talk about a little bit more through social media as well. And yeah, so that's pretty much what I've been doing. So
Yeah. So, the listeners might be wondering, like, okay, so why is Sean on? Sean's not promoting a game. Sean's not doing a thing. We are here to talk about a highly contentious issue right now going on in the TTRPG space, specifically in the D&D space, and that is the removal of spells and the replacement thereof with the 2024 versions of the spells. I really wanted to kind of have an episode where we just kind of sat down and talked about this because I have been pretty critical of Wizards of the Coast in the past. That's kind of one of the things that, we started the podcast on was us exploring games that weren't Dungeons and Dragons.
mm-hmm.
Instead, basically us just exploring whatever we could and learning what we could and kind of taking those to make our own games and be better storytellers because we really like telling stories.
Mm-hmm.
However, full disclosure, as many of you know, I am a game master for hire on Start Playing Games, and something around 80% of my income does come from me running Dungeons and Dragons on Dndbeyond.com. So, because of that, I have a bit of skin in the game when it comes to the things that are happening with Dungeons and Dragons as an IP, as well as the decisions that are being made on D&D Beyond. Andrew, on the other hand, did not, and so he gave me some notes of things that he would like me to talk about, but he didn't really have much to contribute to the conversation, and he kind of recognized that as somebody who has kind of left Dungeons and Dragons. So I sought out a friend and mutual who also had a lot of experience with Dungeons and Dragons and a lot of opinions on that as well. So, sum it up, Sean. What's going on?
Yeah, so as most of us know, they are releasing the 2024 edition of Dungeons and Dragons, still 5th edition, but just kind of called 2024. A lot of people calling it 1D&D, some people calling it 5.5. Some people calling it 6th edition, but, Wizards of the Coast is just calling it, 2024 edition. And the longest time people have been talking about what will this mean for D&D Beyond, because if I remember correctly, this has been the only edition that D&D Beyond has worked with, right? We didn't have any like 4th edition or before that on D&D Beyond. And so as they're moving to this new edition, a lot of people had questions about what's this going to mean for my characters and for my games I'm running, that I want to stick with 5th edition from 2014 because I don't want to be moved up to 2024. So Friday, Wizards of the Coast puts out a change log updating people what's going to be happening in the next month or so. And in that, it says that they are going to be tagging a lot of stuff as legacy from 2014 core rules, things like, subclasses, backgrounds, feats, things like that. And then there was a section in there that said that for spells and magic items, in the character sheet, it's going to be defaulting to the 2024 version, meaning that if there's a 2024 version of the spell that existed for 2014, then that 2014 version will not be in the character sheet. Now, the changelog was very clear about you're not losing that from the book. So if you bought the 2014 Player's Handbook, then you still have access to that spell. That won't go away, but if you want to add it to your character sheet, you're going to have to homebrew it now and add it manually, because the only thing that's going to be available is the 2024 spell list. Now, a lot of people, were up in arms. Some of them fairly so. Others, I think, there's always going to be people that's just waiting for something to happen to just pounce on it and hate Wizards of the Coast, right? And I feel like that's that tends to be unfair. Like, as much as as many missteps that they've done in the past, I think we also have to be fair in our criticism as well. So they're not deleting anything. There's articles that said that they're deleting it completely, and that's just not true. What they're just doing is not making an option in the character sheet.
Right.
But the conversation has been kind of centered around, what does that mean for my campaigns and for my players who's using D&D Beyond if they're wanting to stick with the 2014 rules. And that's been the conversation that a lot of people have been having ever since, I think, beginning of this year. And so that has kind of created panic for a lot of people. A lot of people talked about it. I created a video about it that kind of took off. I wasn't expecting it to have a lot of views and comments and stuff like that, but it did, and the next day or later that night, Wizards of the Coast put out an article kind of clarifying some things. And one of the things they clarified is they said that, magic items, for example, they said that, again, this is all going to be in the 2014 handbook. It just won't be in the character sheet. And they explained that only 2 magic items are being affected. Now, had they included this beginning, I think it would have went over a little bit smoother. Now, they didn't do the same thing for spells. So I think, that's probably going to be a little bit trickier, because when they say, do the updated version, it's going to get tricky, because there's going to be some things where, it's the 2024 version. Did things really change with it, or is this rewarded? And so it just might be rewarded in a way to be clear. But again, anytime there's a change, a lot of people are really concerned about. And so they kind of clarified some things and said, here's what's really happening. But the things that they still haven't clarified is why they're removing that agency for people to opt into 2014, where they're making that as an option for all the other things where it's tagged as legacy, and you can still use those. And I think the other thing that would have been really helpful is if they just kind of clarified, which spells are going to be affected by this, right? Because I think there's a lot of speculation how many that's going to happen. So a lot of people did get upset by it. I thought it was just a misstep, but looking back at it, it's also the first time that they made an edition update, so they probably weren't expecting this sort of thing to happen as a response from people, which I don't think it should have been a complete surprise to them, but
no, not at all.
Right. But with this being the first time they're moving to a new edition, I can see this being a surprise to them as well too. But yeah, that's been the conversation. A lot of people have been I feel like unfairly criticizing, but there have been people who brought up good points. Like, some people use D&D Beyond as for accessibility reasons, in terms of
yes, absolutely.
They use a screen reader. So now if they want to have the 2014 spell, they either have to go to a new tab, which can be cumbersome for somebody that's relying on screen reading technology, or you're going to have to homebrew, how many magic spells to add to your character sheet just to have it in there. And a lot of people are questioning, is this something that they could have just add in and create and allow people to have with the, the same way that they're doing with all the other stuff that's happening in 2014 as well too. So that's kind of what's been happening in a nutshell. Yeah.
We'll have some speculation in a minute, but first thing, I want to make some things perfectly clear, for you, the audience.
Right.
Listen, I also get really mad about capitalist bullshit. Right? So when things happen that are super inconvenient to the consumer or anti-consumerist, those things annoy me. This whole situation has annoyed me, mostly because of the headache that it's causing within my games. Right. We've talked, you talked about what happens in the middle of the game, and I feel like at one point I read that the spells on your character sheet won't be affected. Whereas on the other side, I heard, all those spells are going to be, replaced. And it's okay, that's frustrating. On the other, on another side of it, my games are very deep role-play games.
Mhm.
And as such, something that large, something changing how magic works within Dungeons and Dragons
Mhm.
has to come with a story reason.
Right.
Right. I have to like essentially ease my players for one, and in game for them and their immersion, because like my players are amazing and they are incredibly immersed all the time. I love it. I don't know how they do it, but they're really good at it.
Right.
I have to come up with like, oh, the weave has changed, right? To explain it. But
Yeah.
you look at what, the deletion, right? And it's not really a deletion. It's more so these spells, the old spells, will not automatically work on D&D Beyond anymore.
Right.
You'll have to homebrew them by copy and pasting the stuff, which is fairly easy. But you mentioned something that I think is very true. Only a few of the magic items are actually affected, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not all of the spells are affected either.
Right.
We just don't know how many.
Right.
And that's frustrating. If
Mhm.
they were to say, hey, we have, I don't even know how many spells Dungeons and Dragons officially has at this point,
Right.
but it's a lot. If they were to come out and say, hey, 100 out of 500 spells are affected, right?
Mhm.
I feel like people would be a little bit more at ease with it, especially if they were to do a bit of a change log, like an actual change log, not
Right.
one that explains what's happening, but one that actually has the changes that people are going to be experiencing.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's extremely important because I've gone through and I've read some of these new spells, and some of them I really love,
Mhm.
right? Some of them are going to take some getting used to. I
Right.
don't like it more or worse than the old.
Right.
And then others I'm like, that's kind of frustrating.
Right. Right.
And I completely understand where players and other game masters are coming from on this.
Mhm.
However, Andrew and I had a conversation in 2016, I believe, 2017, where he was specifically saying, hey, I'm not going to buy books on D&D Beyond anymore.
Mhm.
And this was 8 years ago.
Right.
He's like, hey, I'm not going to buy these books on D&D Beyond anymore, because digital licensing sucks.
Mhm.
And that means that I don't own it. And he's like, why are you buying every book? Because I have every book on D&D Beyond because of autism, but
Right.
also because I like options. I love
Yeah.
options. And so I bought every book before I even became a game master for hire. Unfortunately, I bought every book before the OGL scandal
Yeah.
last year too. So like, I didn't know. I knew that Dungeons and Dragons made terrible decisions on occasion.
Right.
Absolutely. And that's fine. But I don't want to be all doom and gloom and negative, or even all too positive for Dungeons and Dragons for this episode, not session. But I do want to kind of like give them a bit of a fair shake, and so that's kind of where some of my speculations are going to be coming in.
Mhm.
So you said, they haven't really released a reason for why they're removing these other spells. I think it's very simple, and it comes down to the library database in which these spells are pulled from.
Mhm.
It's not about storage space, right? It's
Right.
text. It's minuscule.
Right.
I do believe it is about the hyperlinks within said text, because as we know,
Mhm.
they are moving over to the 2024 rules for a lot of things, such as conditions,
Right.
and the tooltips, right?
Mhm.
And so because of that, all of these old spells did have the previous tooltips within them, meaning they would have to be changed one by one,
Mhm.
right? And so even if the spell is not different than the new spell,
Right.
they would still have to go through and kind of adjust that.
Right.
Now, you could say, and I agree with this position, that you could, in fact, leave that hyperlink where it's at for those
Mhm.
conditions and give people a toggle.
Right.
2014, 2024, play which one you want.
Right.
That's the ideal situation.
Mhm.
And I'll be honest, I think that they really looked at what they had and they thought that this was going to be well received widely,
Right.
especially because people who, as far as I know, and people can fact check me on this, people who don't have the spells from the 2014 stuff, like that don't have that, are getting the new spells.
Right.
And so that is basically them, in their eyes, giving free stuff away.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I get where they're coming from on it. But like, as some of our mutuals would say, like, hey, Wizards of the Coast is a terrible company. And they sent the Pinkertons after somebody for a card. Like, we understand Wizards of the Coast, not great.
Right.
Hasbro, also terrible company. But I'll be honest, I don't think the team behind Dungeons and Dragons wants the bad things, right? I don't think they want these horrible decisions to be made.
Right.
And it always kind of bums me out because, like, I look at Chris Perkins and I look at Jeremy Crawford, and the amount of love they have for what they do, is huge.
Oh yeah.
Like, they genuinely care about how the game performs. So that brings me to my other speculation. They genuinely were embarrassed about the balance of 5th edition. Because if anyone who has played 5th edition for 10 years knows, balance didn't exist and hasn't really existed, and it got progressively worse over time. I don't know what your experience with that is, but it's so hard for me to provide a challenge for my players because of the poor balance.
Right. Yeah.
Where all of us, they're just destroying me. And it's like, like, some of them are having fun. Others are like, can you please make these harder? And I'm like, I'm working within the rules right now. I'm doing my best.
Right.
So I don't know what your opinion is on that, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. I've been in a series of games where I feel like balancing encounters is a bit of a challenge for DMs, especially for new ones. Like, I've only really ran one game so far for multiple people, and that's Lost Mine of Phandelver, because that's like the classic. If you want to learn how to play, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, that's the one you go with, because it kind of gives you all the, traditional stuff that you would experience in Dungeons and Dragons.
It's an incredibly traditional module.
Yeah. And in the games I played as a player, there's been one continuous campaign we played where I think we've surprised the DM with what we were able to do to the big baddie at the end. Some of it I think was just kind of, roll the dice and just, roll that way, because our monk was given some sort of potion that I think was from a random table generator that ended up like throwing the big baddie like back and proning. It was like I don't think it was gargantuan, but I think it was a huge size character. And they were really surprised by that. And then, there's other games where, again, it was just more luck of the dice. Like, I just played in, I just came back from playing Dungeons and Dragons in a castle that they had in Ohio this past week. And
I'm so jealous.
It was honestly the best experience I've ever had. Like, I was,
I'm sure.
It was phenomenal, because like it is expensive, yes, but I felt like I got my money's worth and then some, because of all the things I was able to experience and all that. But the big baddie that went up against was the dragon, and it was a challenging dragon to go up against with a team of like a party of 5 people, because every turn we had to do like a charisma saving throw, and the DC was really high and all that stuff, right? But I was able to actually finish off the dragon, because as a barbarian, I actually had 2, I did reckless attacks, 2 attacks per action, both were crits, and boom, and so I think in terms of balance, it's definitely not the way it's kind of structured is it kind of comes more with experience than it is caked into the system a little bit, because the challenge ratings are supposed to help with some of that. But again, there's a lot of factors that go into that as well too, because they really just, they're like, what level is your character at? Good. This is what we're going to go with. But like different level characters are really diverse now, especially when you're pulling in like unofficial third party, subclasses, stuff like that. Like that could really, change some things. So definitely,
or
it's
even
something
additional subclasses that came later.
right. Yeah, exactly. Or even like Artificer. Like Artificer is like a,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's one that I think, to be honest, I think Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins were just like, I wish we never created this class or this class.
It's always been really popular,
Mm-hmm.
right? The idea of it. I don't think it's often executed well, and that's kind of the
I hear a
problem,
lot
right?
of I hear a lot of like just like anything in Dungeons and Dragons. I hear a lot of like both sides to that sort of thing. Like everybody loves it, DMs hate it, things along that level. But going back to what you're saying, I went to the press event that they had at Gen Con the Wednesday before with Dungeons and Dragons, and I got to hear the team from Dungeons and Dragons speak. So Jeremy Crawford, Chris Perkins, Lynn, I forget her last name, but she's the VP of franchise and product. And then the people who are running Project Sigil, which we won't get into that, but you could tell like they're all just really, just like what you said, passionate about what they're doing. They're passionate about the game. I think, hearing those people and what they have to talk about and how they talk to people and all that stuff, like I really think this is being done at a higher level than where they're at, because I feel like they're
Yeah.
probably ones that are trying to push back on some of these things. But again, this is one of those things where it's like it's probably been blown out of proportion in the long run. But for me, the biggest thing I've been concerned about is I just don't want D&D Beyond character sheet to take away agency from players, because I feel like that's what's really going to start splintering people off. I think canceling your subscription before you see what happens, I think, is a little bit premature. But I can also see why people are concerned about it because of what happened with a la carte being pulled away,
Right.
with like some of the other stuff that has happened within D&D Beyond. Like I can understand why people are heading that direction anyways, because they were just looking for a reason to do that. But I think, if they could give more of a reason, because like you said, like there's a lot of speculation. I think your speculation is like not off. I also know that Jeremy said that one of the things that they want to do is when they make it backwards compatible is that if you have a 2014 wizard and a 2024 wizard, they have to cast the same spell, right? Like I think Fireball is the example you use. Like Fireball has changed. You can't have two different wizards.
It does 8d6 instead of 6d6 now.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
So.
yeah. And it doesn't go around corners anymore, which is great by my as the game master, I can tell you. I like that change.
It's going to help a lot now. Yeah. Yeah. So I think part of it was trying to get people on the same page, and spells makes a lot of sense because, that's where a lot of the crux of it is at. But the fact that they haven't really explained why they're making this change, I think this is why a lot of people get upset, because they don't know why. And so they go off into the lot of the conspiracy theories or deep end of, everything's a cash grab. Like, their business, they have to make money, but not everything is going to be a cash grab. And I truly don't think this is a cash grab, at least not yet. I know some people they're slowly rolling that out. I'm like, I don't think they're going to say they're going to make all this stuff legacy and then like pull that out and say they're not making that available anymore. Because I think that's even a worse business decision than this to roll it out all at once too. You know, so
absolutely.
Not that they haven't made, bad business decision, but I truly can't see them, thinking that's going to be good in the long run, no matter what.
No, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, going back to what you said about, having two versions of spells, sure, you could, right? Technically, as the game master, I would absolutely hate that.
Right.
Because that means that I have to keep two versions of a spell memorized, essentially. Like, I already have to ask, all right, can you read that spell description for me again,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And if all of a sudden someone else is, casting aid and everybody's getting 10 hit points, and then someone else is using the 2024 version of aid and they're casting, I don't even remember what it does, but it's kind of useless compared to the old aid. One of the changes I don't like, by the way. That's really frustrating, and I understand where they're coming from. I can see the business decision in this, and it is I would prefer to be able to have like a toggle that says this game is 2014 only,
Right.
or
Yeah.
this game is 2024 only, and then
Right.
that way the 2014 can use the old spells, 2024 can use the new.
Right.
I know why they don't want to do that, and it's because they want to give players the option to play the new classes alongside people who are playing legacy classes.
Right.
That's exactly what it is. It's the very reason why they decided that the legacy classes are now going to receive their subclass at level 1.
Right.
Because that lines up with how the 2024 classes are.
Right.
So you look at it and you're like, yeah, you know, that makes sense. Also, because they are still relying on content from the 2014 books. They don't want to like outright say that they are, but when they say things like, oh, you can still choose the Hexblade as your patron, right?
Yeah.
Even though it's not in the 2024 books,
Right.
that means that you are choosing a patron from a previous edition, the best patron, easily. But you know, and that's kind of where I'm seeing like this. Oh, okay. So you want to have everybody kind of do that because then people are going to get curious,
Right.
right?
Right.
They're going to get curious about these new classes, and then they're going to start asking about them, and then maybe eventually they'll convert over to them.
Right.
Not everyone will. People are stubborn, right? Pathfinder exists because people are stubborn, and I'm glad Pathfinder exists, right? Look at Kobold Press's Black Flag, right? It is the SRD of 5th edition with some minor tweaks to continue on 2014 5th edition.
Right.
Paizo did the same thing with Pathfinder back. I don't even remember the date, but it was when 4th edition popped up. Which I believe is like 2009. Don't quote me on that. Yes, it was. It was 2009 because I was still in high school. It was either 2008, 2009. And I remember because nobody would play 4th edition no one would teach me 4th edition. Nobody would play 4th edition. And as such, I went from 3.5 to Pathfinder.
Right.
Because people, I had to follow who was going to play games with me.
Right.
And so I look at that and I'm just like, this is happening all over again. And people are like, well, this didn't happen last time with 4th edition. It did. It's just there were so few 4th edition players, regrettably, because it is a really fun and interesting system now that I have read through it as an adult. It's just there were so few of them. But when 4th edition, when the online tools, it wasn't D&D Beyond, it was Wizards of the Coast official online tools, they sucked. They were terrible. But it's what we had. When they switched from 4th edition to 5th edition, they deleted everything. Everything. They got rid of everyone's content. It was gone. Gone. And then they brought in the 5th edition stuff, and then Adam Bradford created D&D Beyond, and they basically said, well, crap, his tool's way better than ours. And so eventually they just schemed to buy it, right?
Right.
Now, what are some fixes for this whole drama situation, right? I think there's a few of them. My favorite is you can try to pressure Wizards of the Coast to not do this, right? To do the thing. I don't know if that's going to be successful, right?
No.
Because they do want to move on with their edition.
Right. I mean, I think you're right. It's going back to do that. I don't think it's going to be honest, I don't think it's going to be in the right direction for where they want to go and what's going to be helpful for the players, just because not everybody's going to be happy. Like, there's always going to be people that is like crapping on Wizards of the Coast, and, you know, rightfully so for like their past experiences, but then it's also always been like an unfair thing. Like, the biggest thing I keep hearing people saying is that, in order for me to use D&D Beyond, I got to buy their, digital books. And I think that's a, load of crap if I bought the physical books. I'm always like, but that's how all the other digital tools work. Like, if you go to Demiplane or Roll20, like, you have to buy the books. Like, that, like, I'm all for criticizing Wizards of the Coast, but let's criticize them fairly and that makes sense. Like, I'm not going to criticize them for something that's a standard industry, like an industry standard, right? Like, that's something that all the digital tools do. I'm not going to criticize them for that, but you're always going to have people that's going to do that. I think really what makes the most sense is they just have to get out in front of it a little bit more and just explain to people why they're doing it this way and what are some options. And I think if they just took the step further to say, let's just go ahead and take those 2014 spells and, like just add those as an option for people to add them in. Like, I think if they were to do that, I think that'll be helpful. They don't have to go back and do the log, like the toggle or anything like that. But I think if they just had like, hey, here's some, not homebrew items, but that's essentially what it is. That's available to anybody if they want to add it to their character sheet. Because the problem that's going to be is that a lot of people are still hesitant about moving over to 2024, especially in the middle of their campaigns that they're running. And they still might be running their campaign for like another year or so. And so if it ends up being disruptive to where now, they don't see the value of using D&D Beyond because it's a lot more work and they feel like they have to start all over, they just might jump the ship and go to a different tool. Right. So I think if they kind of get in front of it and just say, we've already kind of packaged these as homebrew items, so you can go in and add them individually, I think that would be something they could do. And they don't have to like postpone releasing it, but if they just say like, hey, here's on a roadmap that before we have the Dungeon Master Guide come out, we're going to have these homebrew spells that people can start adding in. It's not going to be a great solution, but I think it's at least a step in the right direction to try to amend that concerns that some people in the community has. But again, there's always going to be people who nothing's going to be enough for them, and they're always going to find something with it, So, yeah.
Here's the thing. Here's something that I think that Wizards of the Coast could do to just secure a little bit more good faith back into the community.
Mm-hmm.
They're switching, not editions, right? They're essentially doing not exactly, but very close to what happened between 3rd edition and then the update with 3.5.
Right.
Right. And that was a wildly popular move that they made.
Right.
Back then. 3.5 is... 3rd edition lasted almost as long as 5th edition has. 5th edition is the longest, either the second or the longest running of Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
It's been going on for a while, right? Something that I think they could do to secure some of that good faith back, and it's the simplest thing in the world, and it's the thing that WotC specifically will fight tooth and nail on. Let us download our 2014 PDFs.
Yeah.
From D&D Beyond.
Right.
Just let us do it. If you are so intent on switching editions.
Right.
Right? If you are so intent on these changes being permanent and all of that fun whatever stuff, just let people download them.
Yeah.
Because people, one, would feel a lot more comfortable buying things from you in the future on digitally, right?
Right.
But also, it would allow people to continue to play the game as they want to play it. Maybe elsewhere, right?
Right.
Maybe, right? Roll20 is a great option. Their new D&D 5e character sheets, and the fact that you can use it in Discord now, like directly in a Discord call, is amazing.
Right.
The Demiplane's pretty great, but they only offer third party 5e stuff. I haven't really tried to build a character for D&D on Demiplane because I'm confused where the options, like how I would get
Demiplane doesn't have that option yet. They're still working on it for D&D.
They're still working on it. Gotcha.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Because I think I think they're trying to, especially now that they're owned by Roll20. I think they're trying to do a deal with Wizards of the Coast, right, for Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
Which brings me to my next option. Listen, just make that deal with Roll20 and let us transfer our licenses over.
Yeah. Well,
right.
Yeah, and I think downloading the PDFs, I think even if you want to make the business argument, they could lose money if they do that. I think if they make a policy of when they have a new edition update, like 2024, then the previous
Yeah.
edition you can download the PDF for free. Because at that point, it's like it's been out for a while, people have access to it. The crazy thing is, if you go to 5e Tools, you can access like all the stuff they publish.
All of it.
And I don't
All
know
of
how that's happening. Like, I honestly do not know how. I want to talk to somebody because I'm just like,
Because
how? Yeah.
It's because game mechanics cannot be copyrighted.
Right. But they're books like Lost Mine and Found Dove, like all the books, the adventure books that they pushed out. I'm just like, how is this on website for free? And like, yeah, it was mind blowing to me. Yeah.
And that's the thing too, right? Like, and it's not like they are preventing people from downloading their books, right?
Right.
People are still getting all of that content on the internet.
Right.
Like it's funny because like I had a conversation with one of my friends on our Discord where, speaking of which, you should join the Discord, oneshotsaver.com. But it's I had a conversation with one of my friends on there, where they're like, well, it's not like you don't want that stuff to all get out there on the internet. And I was like, Google's player character options and rules for dungeons. Oh, I think it's too late. Right? Like, just because you're giving us, like, you would be giving us the PDF, like, doesn't mean that you're losing sales. Because here's the thing: the people who are going to pirate something are going to pirate it. Right? The people who are not going to buy it are not going to buy it.
Right.
Hands down. That's just how it works. You're not going to convert them to buy the thing like you want them to.
Right.
It's just not going to happen.
Yep.
So that's one of my fixes. I think that would give such a sigh of relief for the entire community.
Right.
Is to just go, okay, cool. I have a folder with all of my PDFs now. Right. Those are mine. They can't be taken from me.
Right.
I'm willing to look at buying, possibly the new books.
Right.
Maybe. I'm willing to try. Now that I have the ability to play 5th edition elsewhere, if I don't like this, I'm willing to try it.
Right.
And that's the thing, right? But we talked about accessibility as well. I don't know if you were kind of like perusing the discussion tab on the Discord, but one of my players is going blind. She's been going blind for about a year now. And as such, things are getting harder for her in order to kind of like keep playing TTRPGs.
Right.
One of the best online tools for accessibility is Dungeons and Dragons D&D Beyond.
Right.
It works really well for that. And so to look at the people who need that assistance, who need these tools, and to just kind of like go, well, you're just going to have to switch over to the new edition. I do think that is a shitty take, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's one of the things that upsets me.
Right.
Now, do I necessarily blame Wizards of the... Well, I do blame Wizards of the Coast. I'll always blame Wizards of the Coast. Do I necessarily blame Dungeons and Dragons for all of this? I mean, partially, right?
Right.
There always is going to be a bit of blame for it. However, as I had mentioned earlier, Andrew and I had that talk where we said, he's like, why are you buying this? Digital rights are bad. You probably won't be able to have this forever. What happens when 6th edition launches? That was 8 years ago that him and I had this conversation.
Right.
And I said something along the lines of, that's absolutely a possibility. And I'm hoping that they let me at least keep the keep the books. Right. But at the same time, the moment that Dungeons and Dragons bought D&D Beyond, the writing for that was on the wall.
Right.
Because there's no financial incentive, and I hate it. I hate that. That there's no financial incentive for them to continue to support a previous edition, especially when the third-party community will take over and keep supporting it themselves.
Right.
And that's what happens, right? We've done some interviews here on this podcast of third-party people. So one of our early episodes we did was with Friday Strout, She created The Vineyard,
Hmm.
which is like a campaign and villain supplement. It's really good. You should check it out on BackerKit. She hasn't quite released the whole thing yet because it's really expensive to do, even though she raised like $60,000. Like she still has to, finish the book.
Right.
Um, but anyway, the other one is recently we did one with a guy who creates fifth edition supplements on Patreon. Like that's
Hmm.
his whole thing.
Right.
And so he did a crowdfund for spells or songs of the Spellbound Sea, which is a really cool fifth edition supplement that comes with like new naval combat and new like naval inspired classes and stuff and
Hmm.
subclasses, and it's so good. The third party community will keep fifth edition alive forever.
Right.
And so like you can play it and you can 100% continue to play it.
Hmm.
Now, will you be able to play these, fifth edition forever on D&D Beyond? No, I don't think so. And I don't like that, but I also understand because it is a games as a service.
Hmm.
It is no different, and again, I hate this. I need the viewers to understand that I am not saying I agree with this business strategy, right?
Right.
Because people often jump to conclusions and go, well, devil's advocate is always the worst. Yeah, it is. I get it.
Right.
However, Dungeons and Dragons and D&D Beyond in general was always meant to be games as a service.
Right.
And it is no different than Destiny. It is no different than the Division, right? It is a ever evolving terms of service update with new content and nerfs that you were not expecting.
Hmm.
Andrew was talking about, yeah, when I play using a certain build in Destiny, it's funny because the viewers know that I hate Destiny. uh but Andrew's like, when I play a certain build in Destiny, I am like I am under the knowledge that probably in a few weeks it will be nerfed and it will no longer be effective, and I will have to go out and I will have to grind for new weapons again.
Right.
I think that is the grossest, stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I don't like that business model.
Right.
But it's one of those things that is in the terms of service. You
Hmm.
can go through and read it. I can't point out the exact spot, but it is something they have accounted for. And so like technically, we were all informed. We just never read it.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, that's
which
that's
is
how
upsetting.
that's how like a lot of terms of services are and everything, right?
Absolutely.
And it's also like, and let's be honest, like terms of services are written for the legal aspects, not written for
Yep.
people to understand, what does that mean for the common person, all that as well too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
At the end of the day, like they have to make money on some of this, and the decisions that they have to make does have to involve, finances. Like that's just like the reality of it, right? Like that's
Yeah.
never going to be something that people can just, say it doesn't matter how much it's going to cost to do this, because it will on a certain level. But I will say that I truly think, because for people who don't know, like Wizards of the Coast is not just Dungeons and Dragons. It's like Magic the Gathering, right? So it's like the parent company that has a team, and then like there's the dedicated Dungeons and Dragons team that
Yeah.
focuses just on that, right? Like the VP of franchise and product that I was talking about earlier. I believe she came over from Magic the Gathering, so like she was on that team. She came to this one. I truly believe that the Dungeons and Dragons team, with the people that I've talked to, they truly want to connect more with the community and support the community as much as possible. But there's always going to be conflicts at those levels. Like the higher you get, is like, it's always going to be a financial decision, on some level at the end of the day. And to be honest, like that is true of any TTRPG company.
Yeah.
But we just hear about it from Wizard of the Coast more because they are larger and they're entwined with Hasbro and some of these other things as well too, and
Right.
so it just tends
There's
to
that
be.
corporate aspect that isn't there
Yes,
with the other TTRPGs.
exactly.
For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's right. But again, just like what we talked about, D&D Beyond has been great for a lot of people. I have a special place in my heart with D&D Beyond because I couldn't find a game when I wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons, and D&D Beyond made it so easy for me to understand how to create a character.
Yeah.
So it has a lot of benefits for people who want to use that tool, and so I love it dearly. But you also don't have to use D&D Beyond to play the game either, right? Like there are
Right.
a lot of different services that you can use. And I know like if you invested money in buying the source books, it's like, yes, this sucks. And I completely empathize with that because I don't even know if I decide to switch and leave D&D Beyond, down the road, which I'm not planning to right now for any reason. But if I do decide to leave down the road, it's like, what am I going to do with those books? Which is
Yeah.
why me personally, they have the bundle deal that I think is smart for them. I get the physical and the D&D Beyond book, so that way if I do leave D&D Beyond, I still at least have the physical book that I can refer to if I wanted to, even if they got rid of the digital version. So I've been doing that for that reason, just like what your co-hosts have been saying.
Yep.
But that's the nice thing about these TTRPGs is that you, at the end of the day, you just need just a group of friends and paper and pencil and access to the rules, which Dungeons and Dragons make the SRD available through Creative Commons, right? Like they've done that for 5th edition. They're going to be doing that for the 2024 edition. So that stuff is going to be completely free for people to use. So that's the beauty of it, is like you could be highly invested in this, or you could just be like, I want to run my own thing, and we're still all playing that game that we love, and it's still that same kind of experience, no matter if we're using Wizard of the Coast stuff or if we're using our own personal stuff. So
Yeah. No, absolutely. There used to be a way on D&D Beyond where you could download the books.
right.
It wasn't like actually the books. What you had to do was you actually had to go. They made it painful, so painful.
Right.
You had to do it page by page in
Right.
order to download the entire book, right?
Right.
Which in itself was an anti-consumer thing. D&D Beyond did that. That was before they were bought by Wizards of the Coast.
Right.
But one of the things that, and it's frustrating, is that these books that we own on D&D Beyond, we do not own. We own a license, and
Right.
a license is unfortunately revocable.
Mm-hmm.
And what you as a listener need to understand when you are buying a book on Demiplane, on D&D Beyond, on Roll20,
Mm-hmm.
is that if you do not buy the physical and you are not able to download a PDF of what you have bought, you do not own what you are buying. And I want
Mm-hmm.
you all to be very aware of that.
Right.
Because that is kind of where these issues do arise, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yep.
and it's not just happening in the book space. It's become a really big thing in the movie space lately.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of the reasons why they have stopped making so many Blu-rays.
Right.
It's why you can't walk into a store and see rows and rows and rows of Blu-rays anymore.
Right.
It's not good. I don't like it. I think that the preservation of media is important, and that we
Mm-hmm.
should be able to have and keep physical media, and of course digital versions of that media, in order to like reference. But unfortunately, that is the business model of it.
Right.
So,
Yep.
as Sean was saying, if you are going to buy books in the future from D&D Beyond, right? If this is not the thing that has pushed you away to another system or something,
Right.
and you've decided, you love D&D, you still can play D&D with people, I want you to know that you should spend the extra few dollars to buy the bundle.
Yeah.
Get the physical book.
Mm-hmm.
I wish that was an option before I did the legendary bundle.
Right.
Before they started doing that, before D&D Beyond was bought by Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would love to have a huge library behind me of all the books, right?
Right. Right.
That's the
Yeah.
coolest thing ever. So that is something that I think is very important. The
Mhm.
other thing that I think people should be aware of, and we mentioned it early at the beginning of the episode,
Mhm.
was that for now and we say for now because we don't know about the future.
Right.
All of these books that you have bought are still going to be accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you do decide that you are going to play on Roll20, or if you are going to play on Foundry, I love Foundry,
Mm-hmm.
you can run off of the two different websites at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I've done it. I have. We used to use a tool called Beyond 20
Yeah.
a lot, which connected your D&D Beyond to your Roll20,
Right.
transferred your character sheet over, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rolled. So if you clicked it on your character sheet in D&D Beyond, it would roll on the thing.
Right.
I say that because Roll20 is specifically making a toggle, right?
Right.
They are going because they have no reason to delete all of the old spells and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
For the most part, everything was manually typed in on D&D Beyond or on Roll20 anyway.
Mm-hmm.
The new Nexus not Nexus, that's Demiplane, but it's also Roll20. So the new thing on Roll20, I think it's a little bit better. The character sheets are much better looking,
Yeah.
much easier to use.
I agree. Yep.
So that is an option for you. Now,
Mm-hmm.
all of that to say, I love Dungeons and Dragons. I love TTRPGs in general.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Andrew and I started the podcast, is because we just enjoy playing these games.
Yeah.
And there are other games that you can play. However, I understand the hesitancy of players for getting into some new games.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard because for me, I can fill a Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition game on my Start Playing Games, profile
Right.
in 4 or 5 days.
Right.
No problem.
Right.
And it's easy and the players are great. And I might be able to convince some of those players to eventually follow me to a different game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in the paid space,
Right.
right? That's in the professional game master space.
Right.
As far as like your everyday person, we all know how hard it is to get our friends, the people that actually matter in this conversation,
Right.
to fully adopt a new TTRPG. It's a
Right.
lot easier for game masters, it feels like, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seems everybody in the let's play something else space is a game master.
Right.
When I want to play in a TTRPG, and there are so many I want to play in, I want to play in an Edge of the Empire game as a player.
Right.
I want to play as a player in Fabula Ultima. I want to play as a player in Vampire the Masquerade and Call of Cthulhu, even though they hired Mike Merles.
I know.
Bad move. Bad move.
Yeah.
But like, I want to play in all of these games. Problem is, I can't
Yeah.
because I don't have the time. But
Right.
if I did have the time, I would want to play these games with my friends.
Right.
And especially early on while I'm still new at them.
Mm-hmm.
If I were a little bit more, well versed in them, I think I would hire a game master to run them.
Right.
But then I look at my own listings on Start Playing Games that are not Dungeons and Dragons,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been a struggle.
Yeah.
Those listening at home know I am a huge fan of Cypher System by Monty Cook Games.
Mm-hmm.
It is easily my favorite TTRPG to play.
Mm-hmm.
And up there with Dungeons and Dragons to run.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's fun. There's options and like the rules. It's like the rules are easy, but at the same time, it is accessible to do.
Right.
Or even better, I can do whatever I want because there are rules to support what I want to do.
Right.
Where, as opposed to some of the more rules light games where it's just like, you can do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
There's not rules to support it. It's just a rules light system where technically nothing is defined.
Right.
I think that's fun for a night. I don't know if I'm the type of person who's going to play that for a campaign.
Right.
And so when I get to play a TTRPG, I get to play as a player in Dungeons and Dragons.
Right. Yeah.
So that's who
Yeah.
I can find to run games for me.
Yeah.
And all that to say, listen, I understand all of your anxieties fully about this changeover and losing the spells and all of that. I also am not angry, annoyed. I'm annoyed. At the same time, I am waiting to see what spells have changed and what items have changed.
Right.
While also, publicly pointing to Wizards of the Coast and saying, hey, I don't like what you're doing here.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's very important for us to do. I do think that it is beneficial to bully corporations always.
Oh yeah.
Just bully them. And it's fine. They need to earn your money.
Right.
And that's the thing that a lot of people don't seem to realize, right?
Yeah.
With and I don't want to get like too political, but like with the BDS boycotts, right? Where it's like, don't shop at McDonald's and don't shop at that stuff did work. McDonald's had like their first like decline in sales for the first time in like a decade.
Right.
So like voting with your wallet is an option and is something you should do.
Right.
I don't think you should up and abandon your Dndbeyond account.
Right. Yeah.
You did pay that money for those things, and you deserve to be able to use them as long as you can. Right.
Yeah.
I don't want you to decide to, make hasty decisions on things. And I understand that like there are like you could buy into Pathfinder, right? Pathfinder 2 second edition is a fantastic game. Super fun. It gets a little weird at higher levels, but it's very fun.
What doesn't though?
It's a great system. It is free online. All of the stuff is available for you to do. But I understand as somebody with ADHD and the autism side that it is hard to learn rules for some people
Right.
on a text-based website.
Right.
I'm that way as well. So
Right.
for me, I look at Demiplane and I go, oh man, $2,300 for $4,000 worth of books. But at the same time, I don't want to make the same mistake again.
Right.
Where I just bought everything. And so it's complicated, and it's going to be complicated, and this whole thing has nuance to it, and it has so many layers. And I don't think anyone is necessarily wrong about their arguments.
Right.
It's just we'll see.
Right. Yeah.
Because we can 100% say, please don't remove those spells. Right? They've already done it. The code has the database has been written.
The character sheet. Yeah, the character sheet has removed that. Yeah. It hasn't been gone from D&D Beyond. It's still in the compendium, but it's not available in their character sheet.
In the character sheet.
Right. And I think what's really going to be interesting here as well, too, from what we see is that there are spells that are in 2014 that no longer exist in 2024. That what happened to those, right? Because we know that if there's a 2024 version,
because why did those
are going to get
deleted?
Updated. Exactly, yeah. So I'm kind of curious to see, because I don't think they addressed that. I don't think they addressed what's going to happen if there's a 2014 spell and it just doesn't exist in 2024. Are they going to keep that as an option, or is that if it's not in 2024, that's also going to be removed? Because somebody was asking me, the elementalism cantrip, that pretty much kind of bundles together, I think Gust, not dancing light, but the fire, the one that you can call fire in your hand or whatever. It looks like it's a combination of a bunch of cantrips that they put into one that doesn't exist in 2024 but exists in 2014. So now it's well, what's going to happen to that? And we'll find out in mid-September when they release it. So yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
I will say, True Strike did go from being the worst cantrip of all time to being possibly the best cantrip.
Yes.
So that if you're wondering about what some of these changes are, all of a sudden, True Strike is incredibly useful for spellcasters.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So keep that in mind. Some of these changes are really good.
Yeah.
Some of them as I mentioned at the beginning, are gonna take time to get used to, but they're not necessarily worse or better than the old spells. And
Just
some of
different.
them
Yeah.
are different, and people are going to not like them, and that is
Yeah.
okay. You
Hmm.
have the ability to go back to the old spells by copy and pasting into a homebrew. It's not that hard. It is an annoying, inconvenient step.
It
But
is.
Sean, thank you so much for coming on to kind of talk about this, because like I feel like a lot of it needed to be said,
Yeah.
um, and had a conversation had about it,
Right.
because people are confused. They keep seeing clickbait articles online,
Yeah.
and all of that really just makes things more of a mess than anything,
Right.
especially
Yeah.
with Wizards of the Coast not being super clear in their language on
Hmm.
things, and then having to reiterate in a way that also isn't clear on its language.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Which
so
and you
it's
were
good to
talking
talk about.
about, yeah, you were talking about, bullying the companies. Like, that's exactly what happened with this, right? Is a
Yeah,
lot of people, did an outcry, and then they responded to say, here's some clarification. Like, I think same day.
right.
So they
Yeah,
are
yeah, it
responding,
was that
maybe not
night.
responding. Yeah, maybe not responding the way that we hope, but they are like at least trying to listen to the people and address some of
Yeah.
those things, right? As opposed to
Yep.
they could have just ignored it and be like, you'll find out when it happens, basically. So,
Yep.
yeah. Yep. But yeah, it works.
And listen, yeah. Everything like I personally have played Dungeons and Dragons for 10 years.
Hmm.
I really do want to see it evolve.
Hmm.
I would have preferred if they would have come out and said like this is essentially 6th edition. However, I'm also fine with a 5.5. I do like the idea of the game changing.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So, I'm on the fence here. I'll see, what happens. One of my players bought the new books for me. So,
Oh, that's nice of
I'm gonna
them.
yeah, well, it's because they were like one of the only players to be excited about the 2024 edition of Dungeons
Yeah.
and Dragons. And
Yeah.
so that kind of just like reminded me, oh, some people are actually excited about the edition
Yeah.
change up, right?
Honestly,
And
I am. I'll be
yeah,
honest and say, like,
yeah,
I'm excited about it. Like, I love a lot of it. I'm a barbarian at heart. Like, that's my thing. I love the barbarian class. I love the majority of the changes come to barbarian class. I do criticize the background, probably not for the reasons that people think, but there are some criticisms I have for it. But overall, I've been reading through the book. Like, I got the book at Gen Con. I've been enjoying a lot of it. So like I don't know if I'm in the minority or not, but I've actually been enjoying what I've been reading. I think
yeah,
even if you don't
me
like the
too.
rules change, the book itself is amazing in terms of the things that they've included. It's a lot easier to read from a user experience, and the artwork they've included a lot more artwork, and the artwork is just phenomenal in it as well too. So even if you don't like the rules change, like I'm not telling you to buy the book for it, but the book itself they've done a very good job in
Yeah.
looking at making it easier to read and including some gorgeous artwork in there. I absolutely love it. So yeah, so I'm excited. If you're not, that's totally fine as well. But I think there's a lot of good things that's coming out of it that I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah. Yep. I'm kind of in that same boat where like I am excited for change. I'm a person who enjoys change. Whether it's in my Star Wars or it's in my TTRPGs,
Yeah.
change for me is a breath of fresh air. So we will see. When I get the books, I'll probably be talking about it a lot on TikTok and on Threads, on the things that I see. So, follow along there. You can find me, DJ the GM, on TikTok. Don't go to that one. That's where I talk about politics, and you don't need to be inundated with that. That's me getting mad about things. But on Threads, it's DJ the GM, or on TikTok, One Shot Stavern. Uh,
Right.
where can they find you, Sean?
Yeah, I am on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads primarily. Just look up Crit Hit the Giant as my username. It's the same on all those. And then I have a website called CritHitTheGiant.com as well, where I do like reviews and blog posts, and I get the occasional like news releases from different companies as well too that I'll post there as well. So, but yeah, if you look up Crit Hit the Giant, it's probably me. So,
Heck yeah. And Sean was invited to the D&D thing, and I wasn't. So, that's That's a thing. But we're not going to talk about that. So if you're listening and you work for Dungeons and Dragons, keep it. I don't want to go. I am going to be at PAX Unplugged though. So if you are,
That is awesome. Yeah.
I'm just going to say, I'll come and watch, and I'll be honest, and that's what you can hopefully expect from me. If you like what we're
Right.
doing here, please check out our Patreon. You can find it by going to oneshotstavern.com. There you can also find all of our social media links to all of the various platforms that we probably don't use, from Blue Sky to we don't use Twitter. We refuse to call it X, and we also just don't like the way Elon is handling things over there. But
Right.
you can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook. All that you're going to see on Facebook is just posts to the episodes because it does it automatically. And you can find us anywhere that podcasts are found. You're probably listening to it now, or maybe you're listening to it on our Patreon. If so, thank you so much. We really do appreciate anything that you are willing to give us. We are having such a blast with this. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we are going, actually, both Andrew and I are going to be going to PAX Unplugged. So if you're going to be there, please find me, wave me down, or say, hey, let's meet for lunch somewhere, because that might be a little bit easier to do, because, conventions are a pain in the butt. But as always, I'm DJ. This is One Shots Tavern, and we will see you next time.